Hi, this is Mukaddas. So, I have started a series on research methodology and I have uploaded many videos. So, basically, my previous video was about qualitative designs, and in this video, I will cover quantitative designs. Okay, so let's start. So first slide is introductory slide in which there is written that there are three designs in quantitative research. So basically there are three designs in quantitative research: experimental design, correlational design and survey design. So basically in this video I will cover two designs: experimental design and correlational design, and what is the difference between them. Okay, so let's see what is experimental design. Basically, experimental design is concerned with the causal relationship between two variables. Basically, we have two variables. First is independent variable, then we have dependent variable. As I have covered these types of variable in my second last video. So basically in experimental design we study that how and what impact of independent variable is on dependent variable. Basically we observe or we study the causal effect relationship between independent and dependent variable in experimental design. Okay, so here it uses to investigate causal relationship between variables by manipulating one or more independent variable and observing their effect on a dependent variable. Basically we manipulate or we change independent variable. So independent variables are the variable which we can change in our research. Okay, so basically we change independent variable to see or observe the result on dependent variable. So here there are two pictures. First is independent variable and second is about dependent variable. So basically this line shows that the impacts of independent variable on dependent variable. So I hope this basic introduction is clear to all of you. In experimental design, we have pre-test and post-test. So basically, pre means something before and post means something after. So here we conduct, basically we or researcher conduct test before an treatment or before an intervention, and post means that after an, after a treatment or after an intervention we or researcher conduct a test. That test is post test. Okay, this test is conduct for the for or to check the effectiveness or to of an intervention. So basically in experimental design we check our intervention. See, whenever we want to experiment something, so experiment means we want to apply something. So basically here in experimental design we apply or we implement interventions, or this is, we can say, this is a treatment to our variable or to our research to check their impacts or to check the effectiveness of the intervention. Okay, so I think a pre-test and post-test can be a little bit confusing for you because you don't know what is intervention. So basically intervention is a specific action or treatment that the researcher introduces to study its effect on a group or situation. So basically intervention means a treatment or a action which a researcher does while the research. See, let's have an example, then it can be clear to all of you. If I want to check the impacts of CLT, or let's see. So if my topic is to check the effectiveness of CLT in on the speaking of students, so I want to check the impacts of CLT on speaking performance of the students. So basically CLT is a method to teach English language. So what will I do? See, I will take a context or a class. So basically I will divide that class into two parts and then I will implement CLT. So here CLT will be known as intervention. Why? Because I have applied here CLT. Okay, this is an action which is taken by me for see the impact of CLT on speaking. As it shows in the definition of intervention that researcher introduces to study its effect on a group or situation. So let's see on which group and on which situation we or researcher implement interventions. So basically we have two groups in experimental design. So when we want to study experimentally and we want to use experimental design in our quantitative research, so we have to make or create two groups, and those two groups should be based on random sampling. We have to just randomly choose our participants or the group members, and we have to divide them in two groups. Okay, first is experimental group and second is control group. Now let's see what is experimental group and what is control group. So experimental group, it shows by the name that experimental means there's something on which we want to experiment. So, in experimental group, a group that receive treatment or intervention in our research. So, basically, experimental group is the group on which we try or we experiment our interventions to check the result of interventions. Change in traditional treatment for observing the results. So basically interventions mean something new for the students, because before that they have something traditional, so that's why we change their method of teaching, or we change the techniques of teaching, or we can change something we want to implement on them, okay, to check the result of the new thing on them. So basically then we have control group. So basically control group is something that doesn't receive any kind of intervention or treatment. Why? Because we want to compare, in the end we will compare both of groups to check the differences, to check the effectiveness, or we can say uh, or non effectiveness of our intervention. So in control group there is no any change in teaching strategies or in anything, because we want to check the effectiveness of intervention on experimental group. So that's why here in control group we will not change anything, so we can compare both of them and we can change the improvements that occurs in experimental group, or it cannot be occur as well. It depends on our intervention, that how successful our intervention is. So let's see an example, then it will be more clear to all of you. So here I have written a title of experimental design, like checking the effectiveness of CLT on students speaking. So here CLT is our independent variable and students speaking is our dependent variable. So basically we want to check the impact of independent variable on dependent variable, because we want to check the impacts of CLT, that means independent variable, on speaking, that means dependent variable. So in experimental design, firstly we will divide the class into two groups. First is our experimental group on which we will implement our intervention, and second is our control group on which we will not implement our intervention, because control group, the students of control group will be taught by their traditional method, like if their teacher use GTM, like grammar translation methods, so they will be taught with the traditional method, on the method which is a primary used by their class teachers. So basically now we have experimental group and we have control group. Now we will conduct pre-test. Pre-test means before intervention, because we want to check the level of both of groups, so we can easily find the effectiveness or changing which is occurred through or because of interventions. Okay, so after pre-test we will implement our interventions on experimental group. Okay, now for 15 or 20 days the students of experimental groups will be taught by CLT method, and the control group students will be taught like as they were taught previously through the traditional method which their teachers use in the classroom. Okay, So now intervention has been implemented on experimental group. Now after the specific period of time, we will conduct a post test sorry, we will conduct a post test to check the results that our intervention is successful or not. So does the speaking proficiency has improved or not through CLT as compared to the students of control group. Then we will conduct a post test of both group, control group as well as experiment group, to check the results of both, and then compare both results to check the ratio that which students got high performance in speaking and which students are improved in their English language or in their speaking proficiency. So we can check the effectiveness of our intervention. So here my example shows that in experimental group we implement CLT as an intervention. Then their speaking is improved as compared to the control group. That means my intervention is successful. And speaking skill can be improved through the implementation of CLT. So that is proof that CLT is good for the improvement of speaking. Then we have correlational design. So basically it is also the designs of quantitative research. So in correlation research, we check the relationship between two variables, that how these both variables are related to each other. Then it finds out whether there is a relationship between two or more variables, and if so, how strong that relationship is. So we find, or researcher finds the relationship between two variables, and they check that if they have relationship to, so how their relationship is that strong, weak, or average. Okay, so let's see an example, that a correlational study on the relationship between reading habits and English vocabulary size among students. So basically we will check here firstly we have variable, that is reading habit. Reading habit is a variable, and then we have English vocabulary. Okay, that is another variable. So basically we will check the connection, or we will check the relationship between them, how much strong is it. So basically if we have the habits of reading, so of course our vocabulary will be improved or increased. So here the connection or the relationship between these two variables are strong in my opinion. But here in correlational design, basically we check the relationship between two variables as you see in my example. So in next slide we have difference between experimental and correlational design. So basically many students get confused in these both designs, because in these both designs we study variables. So basically in experimental design we can manipulate or change independent variable to check its impact on dependent variable. But in correlational design we cannot change variable, we just check the connection or relationship between two variables. So first difference shows that in experimental we can change variable, but in correlational we cannot change variable. Then in experimental design we have two groups. Okay, two groups are involved in our study, experimental group and control group. But in correlational design we don't have any group specifically. So basically I have covered two designs of quantitative in this video, and the last design is our survey design that will be uploaded inshallah in my next video. So I have covered the designs of qualitative research except one, that is a grounded theory, and I have uploaded all the designs of quantitative research except survey design. So if you have any query and question, you can ask me, I will try to respond you. Thank you so much.